Hey y'all, Toad here. Yeah, this is a mirror. I don't do a lot of mirroring, but when I saw this one, I realized it just had to go out there. I have been sub to Ted for a quite while. I mean, this goes back to when I first, actually, long before I was even making videos. And I just want to do a little intro for the mirror because this guy knows what he's talking about. He's an experienced man and a serious collector and student of military equipment, history, tactics, and he also just has a great mode of communication. For those of us who have a tough time public speaking, you can really appreciate the fact that Ted does a good job in his videos and explains things well. I hope you enjoy the video. I want to publicly thank Ted for giving me permission to go ahead and mirror this. And the only thing I ask, if you like the video, by all means, go over there and let Ted know, sub, send him a message. If you don't like it, tell me. All right, y'all. Hope you enjoy. Fair winds.
I'd love to be able to tell you about, make some predictions or tell you some categorical things about what is going to happen in future after the passage of this change to the gun laws in the United States. But I can't. I can't predict the future, and I can't make categorical statements about things that are definitely going to happen. In order for me to do that, I'd have to be a left-wing politician. I do, however, know a little bit about what's happened in the past, and it occurred to me that this legislation, the proposals, kind of fall into the category of the United Nations arms embargo during the what became known as the Bosnian War. You remember back in the 1990s and the fragmentation of the previous country known as Yugoslavia, the Serbs, the Croats and the Bosnians were all at each other's throats. And the United Nations, in its infinite wisdom, decided that the solution to this problem was to impose an arms embargo. The thinking being that if we could prevent the belligerents from having access to weapons, then, irrespective of how much they had each other, they wouldn't be able to butcher each other. Not a bad theory, but for the fact that it left out the fact that the Serbs already had the weapons. The Serbs dominated the Yugoslav army. When the country fragmented, they were very quick to secure the army arsenals. They had the heavy artillery, they had the jet aircraft, they had the armoured vehicles. So the arms embargo had no effect other than to impoverish the victims, which were very clearly, in this instance, the Bosnian Muslims. And we saw what the outcome was in Sarajevo, with civilians being surrounded by Serbs with artillery dug on the hills, being shelled for about 2 years in a row, sniped every day, nightmare situation. To make a bad situation worse and more evidence of crazy, woolly thinking, the United Nations then implemented this thing called a safe haven in a place called Srebrenica. You might remember it. They said to the refugee population who were trying to get away from the advancing Serbs, come over here, we will put you in this enclave, it's going to be declared a United Nations safe haven, and we will arm it and guard it with UN peacekeepers. So many thousands of refugees poured into this place. The glitch in the matrix was that the Serbs came marching down and having utter contempt for the United Nations peacekeeping troops. In this instance they were Dutch peacekeepers, pointed guns at them, said, get out of the way, we're going to kill you. And under orders the Dutch stood down. What happened then was the Serbs went through and they separated all the young men of military age, put them on the back of the trucks, drove them out to the fields and machine gunned them. Between 3,000 and 5,000 people were massacred. Obviously women were raped. It was a tremendous atrocity. Aided, abetted, assisted by the United Nations. We made it very convenient for the Serbs. We concentrated these people in a gun-free zone, if you will. And then when push came to shove, we decided that we weren't prepared to fight, and the Serbs were able to help themselves. The proposals that Feinstein and company, the anti-gun people, are making with respect to the gun free, I'll talk about this very, very briefly, and I'm going to talk about things that really concern me. That you've got a gun-free zone, which we know doesn't work, and all the great massacres the last 15 years have occurred in gun-free zones. But they're making it even worse by saying, in addition to that, we feel so strongly that guns are terrible that we're not even going to staff our safe haven with peacekeepers. We're not going to let teachers have concealed carry permits, and in the majority of instances we're not going to put armed guards on the premises. That to me is evidence of pretty shonky thinking, and it's not the worst of it. Why I am opposed and think it's going to be a very, very bad thing if Senator Feinstein's proposals go and pass into law is to do, again, certain aspects of it to do with history. She only needs to ask the Canadians about a register, a national gun register, to learn what an ignominious, expensive failure looks like. The definition of insanity is when somebody does something over and over again, leading to an outcome which doesn't work, goes back at the beginning and starts doing exactly the same things again with an expectation that the outcome is going to be different. That's one of the signs of clinical insanity. A lot of what she's proposing has been tried before, and it has not delivered us to nirvana. It hasn't made any difference, any measurable or appreciable difference. And if you want to talk to the Canadians, they were dealing with a problem, gun problem, a fraction the size of what the Americans are contemplating. 300 plus million firearms in circulation at the low end, and that's the ones that they think they know about. There's probably a great deal more. Concerns me the law of unintended consequences, something that kicks in most areas of political life. One of the great ironies, and it would be hilarious if it wasn't so serious, is that the minute Feinstein opened her mouth about the proposals to ban high-capacity magazines, the evil assault rifle, the things that she wants to ban, gun sales went through the roof. I mean, they went supernova. We know this. You can't get an AR-15 these days for love nor money. In addition to that, high-capacity magazines, which she's so exercised about, one of the main suppliers went through inventory, a 3.5-year inventory, and they turned it over in a day and a half. So those things which she purports to want to control and ban and prohibit and bring in from the streets, she has indirectly, but in a way, inevitably, contributed to a situation where tens of millions of these things have been squirted out into the general population. Nobody knows who's got what. Great result. Well done. The difficulty that many of us have outside of the United States is we have an inability to understand what the Second Amendment is about. It's a complex amendment. It's beyond the topic of this video. I'm not going to try and explain it, but it is an amendment which is almost a religious belief amongst a great many people in the United States. It is the amendment which they believe, rightly or wrongly, they believe passionately guarantees all the other things that are supposedly guaranteed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They believe that if you make an attempt to change, trammel, modify, limit anything to do with the Second Amendment, inevitably, invariably, the slippery slope being they will then be free to come and start interfering with the other things in the Bill of Rights. Whether they're right or not, that is what they believe. They believe that the right to bear arms is constitutionally guaranteed, cannot be limited by anybody, any power, the government, politicians. Many of them also believe it's God-given. So there's this religious aspect as well. In other words, this is a group of very, very passionate people who you do not want to push into a corner. I think that the proposals are bad from just about every possible perspective. There are three types of victory. There is a moral victory, a physical victory, and a Pyrrhic victory. Moral victory, the gun grabbers have already achieved that by saying guns are terrible, they hurt people, shouldn't be in the hands of civilians, we want to stop school shootings. Well, gosh, us gun guys also believe precisely the same thing. So they've already achieved the moral victory, they've got the moral high ground. A physical victory in the context of the United States is impossible to achieve. The authorities do not know how many firearms are out there or who's got them. There's no way of being able, even if they were able to knock down the door of every gun owner in the United States and collect everything, there's no way that they can do so because they don't know who's got what. The genie is out of the bottle there. One of the problems is that politicians are not allowed, they do not allow themselves to stand up and say, you know what, I can't do anything about this problem. It's bigger than me, it's not possible for me to make the kind of material difference to a situation that the electorate or chunks of the electorate demand that I make. If they were to do that, of course the inevitable rejoinder would be from us, well, what use are you, let's replace you with somebody who says that they can. Even though they don't necessarily believe it, I want you to tell me that everything's going to be okay and that you are going to do something about it. I almost feel sorry for politicians from time to time. I don't feel particularly sorry for Feinstein though. I don't think that she really understands what kind of shit fight she's buying into here. You've got to pick your fights, and this is not a fight that she's going to win. And the consequences of attempting to implement and enforce this law are going to be pretty awful in my view. I can't predict the future, I said that at the beginning, but there are fairly ominous warning signs. I believe that there will be massive non-compliance. There will be huge numbers of people who simply case their high-capacity magazines in their AR-15s. They will not register them, they sure as hell aren't going to surrender them. That's number one, massive non-compliance. When you create a law, the very first thing you should be looking at in a law is that it is enforceable. If it's not, don't create the law, because all you do is bring the law into disrepute. You make a mockery of the law. There will be huge non-compliance. People who have never had a parking ticket in their life are going to be criminalised overnight. And people that I know who have told me, I'm not going to comply with this. I'm going to stash my gear, I'm not going to comply. They're not criminals today, they're not criminals tomorrow, but they will be criminalised the day after this legislation goes through. It's not sensible, in my estimation, to criminalise such a potentially huge chunk of a population. The other thing that gives me cause for pause and concern is that if there's going to be non-compliance on the part of the citizenry, we can expect, I think, a significant degree of non-compliance from law enforcement. I mentioned the United States being passionately intense about their constitution, and law enforcement and the military are sworn to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. In Nuremberg, the war trials established that those people in the organs of the state, police and the military, are not obliged and duty-bound to follow orders that they regard as being illegal. A great many people in the United States, including law enforcement and military, would regard the proposals as being unconstitutional, i.e. illegal. They will not enforce them. Or they will turn a Nelsonian eye to any breaches that they detect. That also is a sign of very bad law. Not only must it be enforceable, but it must be enforced. And if you've got a significant number of your law enforcement people saying, I don't think I'm going to see that 30-round magazine sitting under the guy's front seat, you've got a problem. They may not choose to enforce it also because they understand, I think, and this is not fear-mongering or threatening in any way, shape or form, just understand I'm sincere about this, I believe that you will see a succession of Wacos and Ruby Ridges. There are people who are at the moment doing no harm whatsoever. They've got their high capacity magazines, their AR-15s, they're not hurting anybody. You come kicking down their door or knocking on their door demanding that they surrender these things, they will come out shooting. Doesn't need to be very many of them. I do not want to see FBI, ATF or police officers killed, as they will be, by these characters, and I don't want these characters to be killed either. It's not necessary. I think that it's significant enough a threat that people are going to be killed as a consequence of the law enforcement's attempt to police a bad law. So why try to do that? Why try to impose it? Feinstein and company are trying to marginalise people who talk about the Second Amendment as being fundamental as some kind of catastrophist nut jobs, which surprises me with Feinstein given that she's Jewish. That she's Jewish is incidental, but she will have a very detailed understanding of the events that happened during what came to be known as the Holocaust. The government of the day, the Nazi Party, using organs of the state, ended up killing, as we know, millions of people that they declared enemies of the state. They were able to do so because they had disarmed the population. They were also able to do so because they had the organs of the state swearing allegiance to Adolf Hitler and not something higher, like the Constitution or, in the case of the British Empire, the Crown. It happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in one of the most advanced industrial civilized nations on the planet. She understands it. She cannot say, with good faith, that could never happen here. It's unlikely to happen in the United States, again, principally because the organs of the state swear allegiance to something greater than politicians, which is the Constitution. But it's not to say that it can't happen. She can't dismiss the survivalists and the preppers and the people that believe that if they come for the Second Amendment, then they're going to come for everything else. She can't just dismiss that. It happened. It happened to her people. She should be empathetic. The stench of hypocrisy about Dianne Feinstein, in my opinion, is to do with her arming herself back in the 1970s. She had profoundly good reason to do so, and I admire her for doing so. If you're not familiar with the circumstances, she and her husband were victims of a domestic terrorist group. These people went so far as to stick a bomb outside their house. Her response was to go, stuff this for a game of soldiers, I'm going to tool up. She got a concealed carry permit and a pistol which she carried around, and I admire that. She said at the time it was less to do with my believing that the pistol was going to save my life. If these people really wanted to get at me, I knew that they could, but it gave me the thought that I can maybe take one of the bastards with me. And I thought, great, good on you, I admire that. Love that saying. I came into this world kicking, screaming and covered in somebody else's blood, and I'm perfectly happy to go out the same way. Good for you, Dianne. My question to her would be, you lived in fear of your life, and it was obviously a clear and present threat. You lived in fear. You armed yourself in response to that. Tens of thousands of your fellow citizens live in daily fear of being victims of violent crime. In areas where your gun legislation is already the most restrictive in the nation, Washington, New Jersey, how can it be that you're going to deny them the same kind of comfort that you enjoyed by being armed when you felt threatened? Why is it good enough for you and not for them? Can you understand that that is the stench of hypocrisy, and what's okay for me is not okay for you about it? I don't understand. I don't understand how you can think that you're being consistent when you deny people access to the very things that gave you confidence to get up in the morning and head out the front door. And with respect to hypocrisy, don't even get me started on the actors and the movie directors who appeared in that series of advertisements about we had to have a plan. When I see people who have made a career out of the fetishizing of gun violence, like Matt Damon and a whole bunch of other guys that appeared in that movie, lecturing me about gun safety and the evils of firearms, it kind of makes me want to eat my own vomit. They have made millions of dollars playing those parts. I would admire and respect them if they made that advertisement and said during the course of the advert, from this day forth I will eschew any script that comes my way that obliges me to handle a firearm pointed at another character and shoot him. Because I feel so strongly about the whole guns are bad and we've got to be responsible and take the glamour away about firearms away. All those things, but they won't. They'll go on making movies where they give a body count at the end of the movie about 50 without consequence, filmed beautifully cinemagraphically, and they'll bank their checks and get on with their lives. Quentin Tarantino, oh man, the quantum of hypocrisy is so enormous I don't know where to start. This is a guy that has made a career out of fetishizing gun violence, and there he is telling us we've got to have a plan. Again, I would give him the time of day if he also said, and from now on, I'm never going to make another movie like Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction or any of my other signature type movies that involve beautifully filmed slow motion shots of people operating firearms and getting shot or shooting others. I'd have some respect for them and some time for them, but I don't, because they won't. They'll continue to bank the checks and their careers will continue to go supernova. My main concern about the proposal, in addition to it criminalising a vast chunk of the population which ought not to be criminalised, in addition to it bringing into disrepute the law and changing the relationship between the law enforcement people and their citizens, it's going to change the nature of policing, it's going to change the nature of people's attitudes in relations to the police, but it's more, my concern is more to do with the mechanisms that are going to have to be employed to make even an attempt to implement this law. The explosive growth in, I guess, what for convenience sake we can call the surveillance society. Again, Feinstein's Jewish. She should understand that this will obligate the ATF, FBI, Homeland Security, every other organ of the state to increase their surveillance of citizens to an extent that it's going to make the Gestapo and the Stasi look like choir boys, if they're serious about enforcing. And again, I think if they were serious, if I could respect her if she had come out and said, we believe so strongly that we can make America a safe place, by banning and prohibiting these things, that the day after the law is passed, that's it. You don't get to grandfather stuff, you hand it in, or we're coming to get it. But this grandfathering thing is a bullshit halfway house. It's going to leave these terrible things, in their estimation, these terrible things, assault rifles, high capacity magazines, in circulation for a generation. That's not good law. That's not an acceptable situation. It's just a complete waste of time and resource. Massive non-compliance by citizens, probable substantial non-compliance by law enforcement, the increase in the observational panopticon, the surveillance society, the incredible increase in cost to resource the agents that are supposed to police this, the complete and absolute failure to protect school children tomorrow in American schools. And again, it is this expansion of the political elites' belief in their ability to impose their views and their values on everybody for our own good. This is never good with politicians. It never ever leads to a good, equitable outcome. It's the nature of power to expand. They get away with this, I think it's inevitable in a slippery slope argument, then they're going to have a crack at other things. But you might not be so happy when they come banging on your door telling you that the thing that you enjoy doing today and have enjoyed for the last 15 years you can't do tomorrow because they say so. What else have I got here? I guess I've ticked all the boxes really for ensuring that it's going to go through. It's ineffective, it's monstrously expensive, and it is asinine and intrusive. I've pretty much ticked the 4 boxes which guarantee every piece of left-wing legislation that's ever come down the pipe. So I don't have any doubt that they're going to try and push it through. I would be much happier if they allowed those schools that wanted to hire armed guards, allow appropriately trained teachers to have concealed carry permits. I'd feel a lot better if a chunk of that resource that she's looking at allocating to the security forces went to mental health. That would be a big start, I think, on making inroads into what is the real problem. And I just don't want to see anybody get shot who doesn't need to get shot. And I think that people are going to die if they try to enforce this law, that we are going to see people vote for the rooftops. I don't encourage that, I do not condone that, I'm not using that as some kind of end of days scenario threat. I just believe that people are so passionate about this matter that that is the inevitable consequence. We will see a confrontation between poor old coppers just trying to do their jobs and people that just want to be left alone. So for all those reasons I think it's a really, really bad idea. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe it'll die a natural death. At the very least, they should be putting a pause, stop, think this thing through properly. You're rushing through with emotional driven legislation. You haven't thought through the consequences. I do not believe that you understand the nature of the fight that you're picking. Whether you understand you're picking a fight or not, you are. I don't think you understand the consequences of the law of unintended consequence. So, for all those reasons, let's just take a step back and pause and rethink this, because the solution is going to be ultimately, in my expectation, I'm not making predictions because I can't predict the future, but I suspect that the outcome, the solution is going to be worse than the problem that it seeks to address. So, that is my 10 cents on the topic. Hope you're well. Talk to you soon.